Hello, welcome to episode 14 of the One Life Church podcast, where we talk about things from One Life Church, but also things that we think could relate to you and your one and only life. And we want to just continue having a conversation, and we're going to start continuing that conversation from our lead pastor. He got to teach this Sunday, Bret Nicholson.
Oh, hey. Hey, how you doing? Good to be here.
Yeah. He's back at it. I love it.
That's all right. I'm back in no better than I was before.
No, it was great. I did introduce you odd there, though, so that's part. I'll put that on me.
I put it on you, too. I mean, I thought something was going to kind of set me up a little better. It's kind of like getting a bad pitch and swinging anyway.
You did, but you still hit it, and we're going to...
Okay, good.
Yeah, you're on base, and we'll move on to joining us today. We have Michael Carron, and Michael's been on with us before, and we're excited to have him back on the podcast today.
It's good to be here.
And then joining us for the first time, our technical arts director for One Life Church, and that's between all of our campuses because One Life Church is one church in multiple locations, is Jason McCord.
Thank you. I feel so welcome.
So welcome. And I think it's important. We want to talk about what Jason does here at One Life Church. And Jason is part of our creative arts and communication team. And he's also just someone who makes sure anything that you see tech related at One Life Church, whether that's in our auditoriums, in our kids' rooms, in kids' check-ins, anywhere you can think of, Jason's probably had a part of either making sure it is working or making it work for the first time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Making sure that it's actually functional.
Does that ever feel overwhelming?
If I sit and think about it for too long, yes.
Okay.
So every once in a while,
the secret is just keep moving?
Yeah, the secret is just to keep moving on to the next task. Yeah. If I sit and think about everything I have to do or the people I have to talk to, as far as in their roles, it can feel overwhelming.
Because I think the thing that they've even shown mathematically is that problems don't add, they multiply. Because like if you open a new site, it's exponential effect of different problems, not just you get a few extras. You actually get it multiplied.
I would agree with that fully.
We didn't tell you that when we hired you, but we know that's true. Because imagine that. I mean, you think about all the different things that could go wrong within a building simply on a technical side.
Yeah,
and it's a multiplication effect.
It really is. Yeah. So that's why you got to keep moving. Just got to keep moving on to the next one.
Well, Jason's one of those people. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when you think about the technical world too, it's rarely is the problem what you see. The problem is always like, this isn't working, so I have to go through these steps and find. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is
made out of needles.
It's three different campuses.
The haystack is at three different campuses.
Or a haystack at each campus.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've said before, and one thing that Jason and I always talk about is like anytime you think that you're going to figure this out, like, oh, I'm just going to go hook this up and it's going to take me like 10 minutes. 3 hours later, and you're like, I don't know why this isn't working. And that's the majority of every kind of technical issue that pops up. And, Jason's job is not always to be the one who fixes it, but he resources a lot of volunteers, helps connect a lot of volunteers between all of our campuses to make sure that they do have the information they need, or if they don't, he helps find them that information.
Sure. Yeah. One of the wonderful things about this job too is it's really allowed me to get in contact with other churches, their technical people, talk through some other ideas that they might have, not just on repairing or fixing things, but what they use and what they've seen work for them. So yeah, just getting that kind of a base of people I can call upon is great.
It's funny because the where the job came from is I asked Natalie, our executive director, she's kind of our chief of staff. I said, okay, in the next run, I want you to go through and do just an analysis of all that's happening and all the staffing and everything else. And you pick, we could hire basically one person, we had the money. What hire would you make? And I think she took like 2 weeks and came back. And honestly, when she came back with technical arts director, I thought, really, of all the things we could have, it's that. And she said, absolutely. And she proved it to me. I knew she would. She did all the research. She said, if I could get all the campus pastors not having to worry about that stuff and all the volunteers serviced that way, it would have an enormous impact and have an exponential impact. And she was right. That's true. It was right on. But the first the first glance at it was like, why? It seems like that'd be way down the list, but it wasn't. She said it was actually, it had the impact of lifting a huge burden off a lot of people. And so they could do, especially with campus pastors, they used to get tied up in technical issues every Sunday morning nearly. And some of them still do, you still have to wrestle with that stuff, but it's made it an enormous difference. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And we're all glad you're here. And if you left, we'd all be in big trouble and they'd mourn your loss big time.
I have heard though that like at conferences, they've actually said that, if you don't have a person in a technical role, you're not going to make it, more or less.
Oh, absolutely,
because everything's just going to pile up.
Listen to him pouring on the job security.
It is.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
You guys don't have me.
This is another way to ask for a raise.
it.
But this is one of those things. And if you're in the congregation, you're in the crowd, it's kind of like you're representative, like soundmen and all that. It's one of those things that if it's going right and going well, you don't notice at all. It's the way it ought to be. But if it's not going right, everybody notices. And so if you're doing your job and everything's going well, that's why everybody's comfortable. But that's why, like being a sound man's thankless job, because people only notice you when you do it wrong.
And they'll look back at you when it
exactly.
does.
Yeah. There's feedback. Everybody looks.
But otherwise, they just
if the sound's right on, that's the technical arts director life, right?
It really is. It really is.
All credit in heaven. It's gonna be great.
And Jason has a nickname around our staff. We call him the Tech Hulk. Because not only is he the tech guy, but he's also the guy that we know if we need help moving something. Jason's the guy that's going to be there and pick it up with a pinky and move the whole thing.
That's true. After all the other men have tried.
Yeah.
It's true.
He's also he's really good at doing the floss dance. So if you ever see Jason around One Life campus, you need to ask him about that.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing.
He's really good at it.
I'm terrible. I can't do it.
Floss
I don't
dance.
know.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just.
He's also
old.
a nut clubber.
Yeah.
I'm also
West Side Nut Club, the official. That's right. I've seen him in his hat and everything. And what were you this year? You were like,
I was the main parade chairman. Yeah. So the main parade that happens on that final day, I had to make sure all that went off without a hitch.
So if you enjoyed the parade, give him a call.
You're welcome.
That's good. That's right. That's right.
This is Jason's podcast right now. This is great.
I feel bad.
He's also a former theater nerd.
Yes,
too,
I was. That's actually where I because that actually I would say, bar none, I've told people this, that's helped me in this job, because all the stuff that I did in theater, I was more of an actor / director in college, but our professors always said, if you're going to be in theater, learn every aspect, because you might not get the role, but as long as you know sound or lighting or something, you might be able to get another position.
Yeah, you could have a role.
So it was so we all ran the gamut, everything from makeup and costumes to lighting and sound. So
needs to be that way for church people. Well, speaking of theater, this is a good segue.
That's a good segue.
I think we could. We did on Sunday. We talked about the story of Joseph and the life of Joseph, and I did reference at the top, because this is kind of a neat thing. It is such a good story that has been converted into movies, and it's been converted into a very successful Broadway musical that was written, I think, back in the early '70s, and I forget the authors, but they were big deals back in those days. And we did not know this at the time when we were coming into this subject today, that Michael had performed and been a part of the production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. That is true, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it was my junior year, I think, in high school. I went to Mount Vernon High School, and we did that.
So what'd you do? Were you Joseph?
I was originally Reuben. I was the oldest brother, and and then part of the way through, the guy that played the lead fell sick, and we did several performances, and then so in the last few, I played Joseph.
You did play Joseph. Yeah. Okay, so you got
big shoes to fill, because that is it's a big role. Well, it's a really big role.
No, I've never seen the production itself.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I've actually heard it. Would you recommend
it's really
it?
Good. I mean, I think the one that was done in 1999 was I think Donny Osmond was in that one, so it's a little bit hard to watch because I'm not this is a commentary on Donny Osmond, but I'm not.
Be slamming on Donny Osmond.
He's great. I'm sure he's great for somebody. I'm sure his wife likes him.
Yeah,
but it just was
his wife. Hey,
no, people like him. I'm sure there's a Donny Osmond fan club. I'm just not in it. But
I am Donny. If you're out there,
but no, even Donny did a great job. But no, it's great. They do a great job of not just telling the story, but the different supporting roles leading up to it, and of course in a musical everything song is just a little bit more dramatic, but that's the point behind it. And so they do a great job telling the story. So every time you reference different things, we were talking about this in a staff meeting. There are a lot of things about the story that I know because of the musical, and because like stuff stuck with me, like Potiphar's wife and the brothers and all of that stuff. And so they did a great job. It's really good.
So it does follow the story pretty well.
It does largely.
It does try to track it. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I'd always heard it and I thought, it's probably just a tag and then they go on and do their own thing.
They just sing the story, right?
Yeah. Well, and what's cool, what they do is each song, especially for Reuben, this just sticks out to me. It's been like 18 or 19 years since I was in it, which is kind of sickening to think about. But each song is a different style. Like one song is like more Parisian style, one song is like more Middle Eastern, another song is country western. And so for me as a vocalist, like especially playing the part of Reuben, I had to be really elastic. I had to sing with a country western accent while dancing at the same time, and then I had to sing with a Parisian accent, and I can't remember all the other songs. But it was really, you had to be really elastic in that role, but it was a lot of fun.
Is this recorded somewhere?
I don't think so. It was 1990.
They had videotape back in those days.
It was the same year that Donny Osmond did it.
Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
And here you were kind
competing.
There's got to be a VHS of this
There has
somewhere.
to be.
There might be.
Yeah.
You know what?
Where was this, Mount Vernon High School?
It was Mount Vernon. Yeah. It's this past weekend. I was talking to our theater director at the time, so maybe I could ask him.
That's right. We can make some calls.
Here's a question for you, Michael. If Bret was in this play, what role do you think he would play?
That is such a great question. I want to say Potiphar because he's just terrible in that movie.
What the heck is that supposed to mean?
You're not terrible. I just want to see you as Potiphar because he's just so exaggerated, and they make him like this real.
He's so exaggerated.
I don't know. I would love to see you as or Bob Seymour. I'd love to see Bob Seymour, our CFO, as Potiphar. But you know what? I don't know.
Maybe it is. Well, no, you always got to go with your gut. Potiphar is the first thought.
You know what? Honestly, no. I would say Reuben. I would say Reuben, the older brother.
The part you played?
Yeah, the part that I would play. Yeah.
Which heavy shoes to fill. Don't think I could do that. That's right. Plus, you had to sing country western. You had to.
If you haven't seen it, musicals are always better live than I think you guys know that. They're always better live than they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, watching them on.
It's just part of the experience.
TV never works.
But so if you ever get a chance to do it, I think it's on YouTube. You can see the whole thing on YouTube. But it's worth watching. It's good.
Yeah, I've seen musicals and then tried to watch them on a screen.
Oh yeah, it's not the same.
It's not at all the same. Although even not so good musicals can be very powerful when you see them live.
Oh yeah.
So, well, that brings me to the question. One of the questions we brought up. We can't spend a lot of time on this, but think about what I open with is: have you ever read a book and then you saw the subsequent movie and you're like, oh, that wasn't nearly as good, or maybe, and this I don't think this happens very often. It only happened to me once. You ever read a book that then you saw the movie and you thought the movie did a better job? Is there any leap to mind just right out of your and for those of you listening, just think of what those might have been.
Think of any, nothing comes to my mind first of a movie that I thought was better per se, but I remember the first book that I really like, and I didn't read a lot. I still don't read a lot, but like a book I really read cover to cover.
Cover to cover.
Yeah,
that's how it goes. Yeah.
Front to cover.
Yeah, I only read the front of it. Was The Hobbit, and I remember when that movie came out, which came out after the Lord of the Rings series. I was a little disappointed. I think because they just spread it out so long, and the story's so good, and I felt like they just didn't do as good a job.
Don't feel bad because everybody I think in the universe felt that way about that because
it wasn't quite as good.
It's this story that's not really that long, and they stretched out scenes to get it into 3 different. They took some liberties.
Yeah, I was going to say The Hobbit myself, actually, because I actually read The Hobbit at least once a year. It's just one of those books that I go back to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I read that one. I did read it this year. I was making sure.
Right.
But I listened to it on podcast, or I listened to the audio of it, or I'll actually pick up the book that I have at home and read.
Oh, okay. But when you saw the movie, you thought,
I was like, I was like, we really had to stretch this into 3 movies.
Right.
It was like,
but I think I've heard a lot of people say that it's that the movies of Lord of the Rings aren't better than the book. My wife's read the book, but she says it's not better, but they're good. I mean, they're a good representation of it. But they said they took out one whole character and there's things, but she said the movies were a respectable handling of it, but the book was obviously better. So you ever had the opposite effect though, just where the movie's better?
I always liked The Green Mile. I don't know that I did read the book, but I don't know that just something about the movie just captured me and pulled me in. And the book had some subtle differences, but they were noticeable from screen to book. And I don't really know which one came out first. Really, I'm assuming the book came out. They didn't, make a book after the movie. But
right, yeah.
They used to do that though.
Yeah,
like they used to do that. Like apparently that was a thing back in
that's true.
70s and 80s. They would make a movie, but then they would have a book that would go into more detail.
Because I remember the cover had the movie poster on it. So I was like,
that's true. Yeah. Which happened.
Anyway,
Jaws was originally a book and then became a movie. I know that. But the one movie that I saw that I thought was actually better than the book was called The Firm. For you kids out there, I don't know if you remember that or not. Long back, it's true.
Is that John Grisham?
The way the movie ends is completely different than the book, and it's better in my opinion. I thought it was really good. And believe it or not, little known fact, I've read all of Gone with the Wind.
Really?
The entire book. It's a very, very long book. It's the only experience that can make the movie feel short. Okay, so so if you read the book and you watch the movie, the 3 or half hour, 4 hour movie, it feels like it flies by after you read the book. But actually, the book was very good. It was historical and it was really interesting.
A book I've always wanted to read, and they turned it into a movie, but Les Mis. I've always wanted to read Les Mis.
My wife has bragged about that book deeply. She says, you absolutely have to read it. She says, and we love the movie.
The movie was
musical.
Incredible.
Yeah, but she said, if you love the movie, then you have to read the book. But it's a monster. It's 700-800 page kind of thing.
No, I saw the musical in New York actually, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I did. I got to see that as well. So good deal. So what is now? This is shifting over to the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph is something that most of us are familiar with, either culturally or Sunday school wise or whatever else. But it does kind of live on. And anytime, I've only preached on it a couple times, but when I do, there is this identification factor. There's people resonate with it a lot. What is that? I mean, what makes it such a great story? What makes it something that grabs the heart? What is the thing in there that you think really does it for people? Because it typically does.
I think there's definitely kind of like that underdog story that everyone kind of sees and hears. I think that for me, it resonated with, like you always see that idea of like, man, you're always getting like this person really did nothing wrong to these people and yet keeps getting pushed down and pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. And then finally kind of gets that ending on their own. So.
Yeah, and I think I've heard it even said in our culture, we kind of gravitate towards the underdog story. That's true. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to say the underdog too. I think and you mentioned this in your message, but he through everything, through his brothers, his brothers trying to kill him, and then just eventually, just abandoning him in this, the hole in the ground, and being wrongly accused by Potiphar's wife, and all of that stuff. The whole time the dude kept his integrity, but he also 20 years later kept his love for his brothers, and for his, obviously for his dad. But like that, so many times in scripture you see all this stuff where people like they turn this corner. And it's just like they get mad, and then there's all of a sudden somebody's dead just because they got mad at them. and because you could back in biblical times, it was just sort of like, I'm king and you're out. And he didn't do that. He and that's what I think is cool. It's another thing that just points him more toward Christ. This idea of forgiveness and extending grace, although grace wasn't merited at all. And so that for me stands out really, really strong as a really strong theme and pattern for his life. He was just a guy of integrity, you could tell.
And I like the way the Bible presents it is not something easy, because the process, I think, as we were talking before, Jason, you said you went back and actually read the full story, because I left out, I hated it because in one message I had to leave a lot out, and I left out one of my favorite parts is his encounter with his brothers, and it's stretched out over a while. He doesn't just say, hey, there they are, you're forgiven, we're all good.
Right.
He messes with them, and you can see this process go on. He's not just instantly everybody's forgiven. Did you have takeaways when you were reading that? I mean,
well, it was just, I think it was him trying to help them prove how much that this meant to them. Having this savior type person helping them out. How far are you willing to go? Kind of thing. Yeah. His whole brother staying behind and them having to go and tell their father, and now this guy's got, my other son, I've already lost one, that kind of stuff. But I think what makes it so relatable, just to go back a little bit for me anyway, was that there's so many stories growing up in Sunday school and stuff like that are that require context around the time period, around what was going on in that area of the world. But anywhere you pick up on Joseph's story is a normal, it could happen, you know, it could totally happen from that point. It's
relatable.
You know?
Yeah.
It's so relatable. I mean, to the point of just, I could be Joseph. I could be Reuben. I could be Potiphar. You know what I mean? There's so many different levels there. And I think that's what makes his story so unique.
Yeah, and it's superhuman in the details with it. And that's why I thought, as a strategy for some of you who struggle to read the Bible, pick a story like Joseph and just read it as a story, like you're reading a good short story. It is you're pulled off as its own single book because there's so much detail in there. And this is going to sound bad to say, but please catch the spirit of this. I don't know if you know this or not, but in the Carron, there is a version of the Joseph story. And it really helped me appreciate, because I read through it, and this is not designed to be a knock on the Carron. It's more like if you read it in the Carron and then you read it in the Bible, you really do appreciate just how rich the Bible is at just good old-fashioned storytelling, because the Carron takes all the way. I can't explain it, but it just does. But the details and the emotion and the humanness of the story of Joseph in the Bible, in the Bible's version of it. I even heard an atheist comment on that one time. He had read both, and he was like, oh gosh, yeah, the Bible is actually, just forget what you may think of it spiritually. He said, it's a good old-fashioned, rich storytelling place. And so I think that's one of the identifiers. Have you in your life, as you relate to it, I think one of the things that people capture is that sense of, I thought things were going to go one way, and they went the next. They went a different way. In other words, one of the things I said was, none of us knows what God ultimately has for any of us, and none of us knows how God's going to get us there, which is the hard part. And he went through some terrible things. Did you identify with that in any specific ways? Like, I remember God chose this pathway to get me to this place that I never would have picked. But now that I look back, I go, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, there was a pathway that was not fun at all, but it got me to a place that I know I wouldn't trade either. And if he hasn't, you can say pass.
I'll go ahead and start.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
You guys.
I'm still formulating and I'm coming up with.
If you don't say pass,
No.
you could say make something up.
I really do, and I've given some thought of this, obviously, because I feel like the position I'm in here at One Life is one that took a while for me to get, because, okay, not to go too far back, but as I was getting married and we were talking about having kids together and all this, well, it was one of those things. It was a necessity to have a job that had benefits. I think we can all agree with that. So when I did get the benefits and everything, I was in this job that I really didn't care to be in. I was going to go to New York. I was going to be an actor. I was going to do that whole bit.
Were you really? You're going to go to New York?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually got offers in California to go out there during summer programs and stuff like that. And
holy cow.
I was like, I love this woman. We're going to get married. And then it was like, now we need benefits. Okay. So, hey, let's find a career that can actually get some of that out of the way. And then maybe later on we can do our thing. So that's what actually ended up happening. And then I was in that job for 13 years and I couldn't stand it. It was
13 years.
13 years, yeah. It really put me in a bad place. And I remember my wife saying, it's really not fun to be around you when you get home.
Wow, for 13 years.
Well,
for 13 years.
That's right. Let's just shrink that down to maybe the last 2 years I was there.
Oh, okay.
Because I have my friends at work and stuff like that. Sure, but like the last 2 years were just rough. And I was looking back and I'm like, where is this taking me? This is taking me nowhere. Right. But I was still involved in the church I was attending at that time. And I felt like I was really called to be a part of a church in some regard, some way. And then when I took on this position, it wasn't just, I wasn't running away from something, but I felt like God was saying, yeah, this is what I've been prepping you for. You've been doing technical work for 13 years, and now you can do it for my church. And that was kind of where I landed on it. So it was kind of like, cool. I love this. This is exactly where he wants me to be. So,
yeah. Are you able to relate to that, Michael, or did you?
Sorry, we have a little guest in here.
Yeah,
so Michael's son. He's directing at this point. He's watching the video. That's all good.
He spilled a little bit of water on his shirt and on his pants. So
that's all right. In other words, he's a child.
It's okay.
That's good.
It's okay. You're good. Just don't touch the camera. I think for me, it maybe, but not in the like I expected. things to go a certain way. This is going to sound really terrible. And I
can't wait.
Gray, please don't touch that, buddy. Please don't touch that. Hey, Gray, just back away from the camera, please. Back away. Sorry. Maybe not in the way that I don't think I expected. Sounds terrible. I don't think I expected much from my life when I was younger.
You're right. That does sound terrible.
Like, okay. My wife and I have talked about
Everybody
that.
else is like, well, we didn't expect much of your life either.
This is going to sound terrible, but my wife and I have talked about it before, and maybe it's just because of childhood and all that stuff. But like, there was a time where I was just like, I don't even know, like, if I'm going to see adulthood. Like, you had just this weird at a young age. Right? Wow. Yeah. We've both talked about it. It's really bizarre, but we were just sort of like, I don't know. Am I going to see adulthood? Am I going to, it's just this weird thing. And, but now kind of as I look back, factoring in the whole, like, you said earlier, like we were joking, like you are what high school made you or something like that. Was that statistic or something?
Yeah. Before we started. Yeah. I'd heard that quote from somewhere. You are what high school made you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to be that guy that's just like,
this is a terrifying thought.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, high school was not my glory days. I don't know if I have glory days, but like, it was really formative for me. Like my personality and all that stuff. And,
my phone's ringing. This is embarrassing.
Is that your phone?
Yeah. Okay. I thought I muted my phone.
Is there a mute button on your laptop? Is that
it's muted.
Is that an option?
Just interesting.
Can we talk to our technical arts director about that?
Yeah, that's right.
Get on
this podcast is off the rails.
Such a mess. This is great. Hey, this is honest. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as I look back on it though, I think about like, the everything from, experiences in childhood to professional experiences and personal experiences and all of that stuff. How I got to where I am today, I would not have anticipated that life would have progressed the way that it has in a very positive way. I mean, I just didn't expect to, I didn't expect to have a family. I didn't expect to have, I didn't see that for my life.
You didn't expect much out of anything.
I really didn't. And so I'm just,
that way you're not disappointed.
And it sounds terrible. It's just like anything but here sort of thing. And it was just, but it sounds depressing, but that's real. Just being honest, that's what it was. And so I would not have predicted or prescribed the, life up to this point, but I also wouldn't regret it. I mean, there's just been a lot of hard times. I spent 10 years in corporate and it was really, really hard. Mm-hmm. I had those times where I came home and I was not a nice person. But as I look back on that stuff, it's just like, absolutely. It's changed and made me the person that I am today. And, so I don't know. When you asked the question, I was like, I don't know if I have one of those, but I do, but in a different kind of way.
I don't know that it's necessarily everybody's pattern, but
yeah,
sure.
And Sarah sounded like she was going to chime in there at some point.
Oh yeah, I have one. I can say pretty quickly. As I was thinking about it, it clicked with me. So when my first full-time job out of college, I was working at the front desk of a radio station, which is not like the most exciting thing. You think, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to work the front desk of a business.
Can't wait.
And honestly, looking back now, I learned how to talk to people there. Like I was pretty shy, which is weird to think about now because I love talking to people and I love talking on a microphone or in front of a camera or whatever. But that's really where I learned how to talk to people. And if I would not have done that job, I don't think I would have gotten as comfortable communicating with all types of people, because you meet some real interesting people who come into the front doors of a radio station. Right. Yeah, people who win prizes and things, or they call in, and it's really funny. I actually had a blog, which is a whole nother story for another time, of people that would call in. So, but yeah, honestly, for that, like looking at it now, it's like if I hadn't learned how to just communicate and connect with people there's no way I'd be enjoying as much as what I do now. So
yeah, well, one of the things that strikes me about this story, and the passage that we quoted was in Romans chapter 15, verse 4. He says the scriptures teach endurance, among other things. They teach endurance, which is an interesting choice of words, and it's because, and I think it's because in a lot of those stories, if you'll pay attention, their timeline is given. It said about Joseph, he was 17 here, and it says he was 30 years old whenever he became that position later of the prime minister of Egypt or whatever. And we forget time scales. Like if you look Abraham's life, from the time he got the promise that Isaac was going to come, it was 25 years later that Isaac came. But for us, it's a couple turns of a page. And so, and if you're sitting inside those lives, and so I think sometimes we get discouraged. I guess the point is we get discouraged within God's timeline, because those are long stretches. For 25 years, a good while to be waiting on something, thinking he probably, when he first heard the promise, probably thought 9 months from today, buddy. I mean, it's going to happen. And instead, he goes through this whole odyssey that just leads to where he finally has to face the fact. And Joseph was the same way. He's 13 years in jail, or nearly in jail, and just in prison and all this, or in slavery or what have you. And so inside that kind of scale, it's hard to imagine, and we get very, especially in, we live in drive-throughs, and we get impatient waiting for the microwave to finish our meal. So that's that kind of thing.
And I think we're terrible judges at what we think we really need. I think there's I think we are. I think that we just feel like, put that out there.
Terrible.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
We think we did.
All kinds of depth right
That's
here.
Right.
But no, I think we are. I think we're like, we think that this is what we need. But like we end up getting what we really need, over a longer period of time. And there was a friend of mine, we're meeting several years ago, and we were just kind of going over each other's stories. And there's a song that we sometimes sing at our campuses, and it says, a line in the song says, "You make all things work together for my good," and it actually it's sort of loosely based off of the story of Joseph, where it says, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good," and is based in Scripture somewhat. But he said, it's really like when you sing that, it's sort of, it can be misleading. It's not really you make things work together for my good. You make things work together for the good. Like it says, it makes all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. And so he said, like, there might be things in my story, Joseph's story, our stories, that we can lose heart and think that it's working together for my good. Well, not necessarily. It's working together for the good, and the good of other people, the other people that we're called to, God used Joseph's story, Joseph's pain, Joseph's abandonment from his brothers for the good of people that it was, even if it never worked for Joseph's good, that's not the point. Like he used that situation to rescue people from the famine. So it didn't always work together for Joseph's good, although it did in the long run. It wasn't necessarily intended to be for his good. It was for the good of the
defining
situation.
Good differently. Good is the ultimate, and how much it serves others, and these kinds of things. We don't go into it thinking that. We think, okay, if I lose my job, I'll get a better job. That's what working for my good means.
Yeah,
well, that doesn't really
and that's why I love that when another defining thing about Joseph is he said, this is what you meant, but God. And he says it very specifically. It's not you meant for my harm, but God meant it for good because of the famine. He didn't say for himself. He wasn't going back on himself. It's another integrity thing with Joseph. It's just sort of like, man, the dude was thinking about the people for the famine. He wasn't thinking about he's in this high, so much authority, and he's this really powerful position. He wasn't even thinking about that. He was thinking about the famine. So,
and Bret, I know you ended yesterday kind of with this idea of hope, and shared some statistics, and I was going to ask you to share those again for sure, so we can kind of just talk about that a little bit. And then the idea of hope in so much of where people, I had someone stop me yesterday, and she said she enjoyed the message so much because I was asking her how something was going in her and her family's life. They've been going through some tough stuff, and she said, Bret was talking about 13 years, and she's like, I feel like I'm on week 3, and I can handle it. She's like, but it's not going to be that. It's not going to be 13 years for them. She's like, at least they hope not. But it is one of those ideas of everyone can relate to something, to that. Kind of Jason was saying, everyone can relate to the story, but you can relate to, there's a point in your life either where you are now or you've been in the past, or you might be in the near future of where you kind of are in that timeline of waiting for God to kind of come through.
Yeah, exactly. And the hope reference was it made national news. It was in a number of news outlets where the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, said that America's life expectancy rather, is going down. It's going backwards, and we're the only developed country, the wealthy countries that's happening to. And they said they lay at the feet of two things statistically. One is the suicide rate went up since last year by a little under 4%, which is massive. But the other one was the opioid crisis, and drug overdose is up by nearly 10% since last year, just a little under 10%. And so putting those two things together, then I also said that there was another guy that said that since 1999, the suicide rate in the United States has gone up by 33%, I think it was. And so it is these massive changes. And so you have to lay that at the feet of something. It is a new phenomenon. Now, those things have always been around, but it's new in our culture and our world. And why is that? And I don't think it's all lack of hope, but having been suicidal myself and having to struggle with drugs, I do know that's a lot of it is that, because suicide by definition is I have no hope. As the old saying is, you can live for a certain 30 days without food, a few days without water, but you can't live a second without hope, because if hope's gone, that's it. You're out, you're gone. There's no future, and so you take your own. So I guess my big question for all of us to ponder, and we can't answer all that right now, but is why do you think hope is is just kind of bled out in our country, in our culture? Especially this is here in America. It's American life expectancy, not worldwide. And so why is hope sort of this gone thing, or this thing that's leaking out on the floor? What's causing that? I have theories myself, but it's a good question to ask.
It's an excellent question to ask.
That's right. So fascinating, because if you looked at all the other indicators, other countries, or even like you said, in developing world, if you looked at other countries, they would look at people in the United States and be like, what are you talking about? You don't have any hope. Like
yeah, you got everything.
Yeah. And so I think, a lot of it for me, like when I think about that, is just like when you have so much, like not to over spiritualize it all, but we have so many idols, so many things that we've put out of order, importance and significance. We've put those out of order. And I think that probably has a lot to do with it. Putting things in a place where they shouldn't be, and an order of loves where they shouldn't necessarily be. So I think for me, that's part of it. Like when you expect something that you're never going to get, what you expect out of that, because it's not what it should be. So,
and the reason I think it sounds, to your point, it sounds cliche to say it, and unfortunately it sounds cliche because I think it's such a truism anymore, is because we do live in a place where a lot of people have said outright, I've heard celebrities say this, I've heard wealthy people say this, when I finally got what I was going for and I had that 8,000 square foot home and all that, it really truly didn't, there was still a vacuum.
That's not what I needed.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm wandering around and my relationships are wrecked inside my 8,000 square foot house. And so that's, I hesitate to say it almost because it sounds too common to say it. On the other hand, that soul bankruptcy thing, people experience it. When they reach the top of their profession or a certain celebrity status, wait a minute, it doesn't have what I thought it was going to have when I finally arrived. And that hurts people deeply.
Yeah, and thinking about the idea of, and even taking Joseph's story into this kind of context of like everything that he went through, like if anyone would have went through one of those things in our society, we would take that as, well, there's no hope, there's nothing left for me, why am I even trying? And he always had this idea, or in my mindset at least, if my hope is not in me, if my hope is in something, in me, for me it's Jesus. If my hope is in that, and I believe that's true, that hope is very different than the idea of like, I have hope that I may someday get more money or a bigger house or this or that. And if I never get that, oh well, because this is still there for me. Yeah. And ultimately, I think that's kind of our goal in creating conversations, even on the podcast, but as One Life Church, and the idea of hope, we want to help spread that, and it's going to look different for different people and what that looks like of how they get there. But we all know that it starts with a conversation of what, experiences and having an experience and trusting and following Jesus. So,
it's like, and if you're looking for just circumstances to line up well, then life is going to disappoint you pretty well. Because I've been through seasons where circumstances are great, but I've lived long enough now to know that circumstances are never exactly perfect. They're never, ever, not one day. Sometimes they're a lot better than others. But if you're looking for that, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So what do you do with that? How do you adjust yourself that if you find yourself unjustly in another place, what are you going to do about that? Or are you just going to give up hope? But it's hard, and I relate to it. Again, that 13-year spread is a long time.
I feel like, and kind of what Michael was saying earlier about our ability to judge what we need. I think it also has. You could also look at wants versus needs heavily in that, because what we want for ourselves could be very different from what we actually need. Right. And so I think, this is not an answer to that epidemic, because, it's just, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't know what they really need. And there's no one there to kind of guide them into that of what they need.
And you're told repeatedly what you think you might need, and that is the commercialism society. And
a healthy marriage and these kids, and they're going to go to college, and you need a job, a career, even like what I said earlier, benefits. That's what I was needing at the time, or what I thought we needed, but maybe that wasn't it. Fortunately for me, it worked out that way. But for those who are lost to begin with, it's so difficult to sit there and say, well, this is what you need.
Yeah.
Because they think they need something else.
Yeah. Well, it is very inward focused. It's very much about I, me.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a question, kind of even taking that, and this is not something we discussed at all, but I'm going to ask it anyway and see what happens.
Great.
I got this message through the One Life website actually over the weekend, and I replied to it personally, but they were asking a question about the watching messages online, but they had another thing that said that I really want to believe in God and in Jesus, but when I pray, I beg Jesus to come into my life. I tell him to take control, but I don't feel anything when I pray to him. Why shouldn't I feel something? And I think even if you even take that same process, I think so many people think that they want hope. And then people like, maybe at a church or even people like us have told them, like, we think you can find hope. If hope is not in you, it's in Jesus. And they ask for that and then they don't feel something. What do you say to that? Like, what do you say to someone who's kind of in that situation?
Well, first of all, I have a lot of sympathy for it, because our feelings are affirming a lot of times. If whether it's feelings of love or feelings of hope, they can be expressed in feeling things. So just feeling like you feel nothing can be extraordinarily painful and difficult. I've had somebody say that very directly to me as well. But you also got to, through even psychological studies and everything, that feelings always follow actions and facts and movement. It's never the other way around. They even coach you to, I think it's in AA, they'll tell you, always remember that feelings follow action. If you sit around and wait for your feelings to do something, they'll never happen. But on the other hand, we're ultimately moving towards Jesus because we really believe he is the truth, and we're acting towards that. And then as you walk towards him, those feelings will come. But if you do it the other way around, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because how do you even define what a positive feeling is one way or the other? You pursue it because it's the truth, and that's the hard mental thing to get around, though. If I really do believe that he rose again from the dead, that he died for my sins, and I get those things, and I ask him to come in my heart to say, that's what faith is. It's like, okay, I believe this, I'm going to act on it, I'm going to move. And once I start moving, I think those feelings will come, but never get those out of order, because, and you'll see that demonstrated in other little parts of your life. If you wait around until you feel like exercising, well, you're not going to. This is that simple, or eat right or whatever else. A lot of the positive things, you wait till you feel it. Then,
and I think along the same lines, feeling almost always follows understanding. Like whenever you've got the sort of like, whether it's exercising or having a good, and it's a better foundation for your faith. Understanding in the context of Christianity is a much better foundation than feeling, because if you gauge your hope based on a feeling or an emotion, that's going to be pretty fleeting, just because that we can change in any given moment. So I think just developing an understanding, developing a sort of a knowledge base of what you believe, instead of just always basing it on the feeling, is probably a better place to start. But man, commending somebody that is on that journey, that's really cool. Yeah. That's really, really cool.
I mean, and I kind of replied similar in the sense of, that there's probably changes that are happening and you don't even realize it. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, even asking that is probably something different than what you've seen in the past in your life. And so to continue to keep asking for it and to continue to ask for opportunities to see when it has changed, because I think sometimes that's where we don't realize that like hope is really there because things have changed, but it doesn't feel like it's changed in the way that we think it should. Or unfortunately, we hear all these stories that sometimes get shared are the most, these stories that are like really high energy or really like a really massive change in someone's life. And sometimes it's not a massive change, the people or not immediately at least. And so I think that's where you sometimes get to coach people through that a little bit, that their experience doesn't have to be the same as they've seen on a Facebook video or something like that. So.
Oh, exactly. That's good. And added that, because you can start defining what's authentic. And then if you don't get that exact thing, and if you'll notice in the Bible, Joseph's story is not repeated. It's not repeated in anybody else's life. That's a particular pattern. No one else becomes the prince of Egypt, the prime minister of Egypt, or whatever. Right. Each one God deals with very uniquely. John the Baptist had a very different life than Solomon, who had a very different life from Joseph, who had a very different life from Abraham. And God doesn't tend to repeat much, except for the basics, redemption and grace and all those kinds of things.
Was I the only child growing up that always got this story confused when someone said Joseph? I'm like, that's Jesus' dad.
You're it. That's right.
Yeah. So
never made that mistake.
I'm going to be honest. My team was up. My worship team was up here at East. And so I was preparing myself for the story of Joseph because I'm like, oh, it's natural. We're leading up to Christmas and and started to study up on Joseph.
Number 2 then.
And
there is
and mine's a little bit more recent.
You asked that.
So so when and you'd even mentioned it in a video, like you were talking about the light, and I'm just like, it totally escaped me. And then so we went to the message recording on Thursday. And I was like, but I'm prepared Joseph. For Sunday.
We've talked about that Joseph,
and I was just like, where is he getting this? Because there's not much on Joseph at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Very and mentions him a couple. I'm like, how is he getting this? Is there like some extra biblical text or something?
So you were much. So Sarah, were you much like man? No wonder he was Jesus's dad.
I think I just just as a kid, I'd always hear Joseph, and my mind always went to Mary and Joseph. And then when they'd start teaching on this, I'm like, that was his backstory. And then as I got older and started reading things, but this cartoon version of I'd always get the names mixed up a little bit. So,
that's great.
We've gone a little bit over time today. But
way to go, Sarah. I think
it's definitely my fault.
It's your fault. Yeah.
I think it's Jason's fault. It's the first time he's been on the podcast.
It's probably my fault.
And we kind of answered a question already, so I won't answer a couple questions actually, but I will ask Bret, what are we going to be learning on this next Sunday?
I was hoping you would ask because, so when I originally planned something different. I was studying the tabernacle though, which we did a couple weeks ago. And in the course of that, we have to do the Ark of the Covenant because I decided to pull it out of the message because it was just too much. I had edited out, and so I decided to devote an entire message to just the Ark of the Covenant. And it's a fun topic because, of course, the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark.
We are
going to have clips of that. Of course we are. We have to show pictures. But it's a fascinating from so many different angles. There's this mystery of whatever happened to the thing. They really don't know. There's a lot of theories. You can watch YouTube videos like crazy, which I've been doing. There's all kinds of theories of where it might be, but also it's such a mystery. It does kill people and blesses people, and it's fun. And so we're going to talk about the Ark, and then we'll apply it. Believe it or not, apply it to your life.
Shadow
of grace. Just don't get too close, or you'll die.
So bringing a whip. I'm going to bring a bullwhip and a
the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. We should do that. Yeah, no, it'll be fun. It's a fascinating topic. It really is. Was for me anyway.
Cool.
If no one else enjoys it, I will.
Yeah, well, we'll all enjoy it. I'm excited about it, and we can't wait to have the conversation next week on the podcast. Continue that conversation, and thank you, Michael and Jason, for joining us today on the podcast. It's been fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And you okay? Bret?
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
Okay, good. Making sure you can still teach on, now I'm excited. If you can't be here, I'll be really sad.
That's right. Wouldn't it be terrible? Then he clunked over dead right there.
We can always show that Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's a backup plan for Sunday.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the One Life Church Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Inman. The One Life Church Podcast is produced by me and Thomas Bernardin. Music by Ben Brock and Micah Robertson. To find out more about One Life Church, you can visit onelifechurch.org. Or to contact us directly at the podcast, just email us at podcast@onelifechurch.org.